שום בעיה, תודה רבה לך. בבקשה. בוקר טוב, good morning. אנחנו נדבר עברית-אנגלית, הזמנו את כולם יחד ונדבר הרוב באנגלית, אבל יחד. It's a pleasure to open the annual press conference of Tel Aviv University regarding the annual findings of situation of antisemitism in the world. This year the work is a cooperation, a close cooperation between the Stephen Roth Institute for the Study of Antisemitism and Racism and the Cantor Center for the Study of Contemporary European Jewry. We would like to speak today about the findings, and the order of our meeting would be as follows. First would be our dean, whom I would introduce in a minute. Then it's Professor Eyal Zisser. Then Dr. Moshe Cantor. Then we'll have an open discussion with the participants of the writing of the report and the survey and the analysis of the facts, and they are all here. And we will, right after the two of them speak, while starting the open discussion, we will first hear Dr. Roni Stauber, who wrote most of the report, and we'll see a presentation of the statistics done by Dr. Chaim Feyerberg, and then open discussion. You all have the phone numbers of all the participants and their titles in your files. So let me please present Professor Eyal Zisser. He's first of all our dean, our pride, the pride of the faculty. He was head of the Department of the Middle East and African Studies, then of the Dayan Center, a long list of books and articles, an expert on Syria and Lebanon, and first of all, our dean. Professor Zisser, please.
Good morning. With your permission, I will start with a few words in Hebrew for the Israeli media, because I think it is important to send a very clear message. מכובדיי, and then I will summarize and continue to
אבל מבקשים שתדבר אל ההנה. כן.
מכובדיי, 80 שנה אחרי עלות הנאצים לשלטון, 70 שנה אחרי פרוץ מלחמת העולם השנייה והשמדת יהודי אירופה, אירוע מן הסוג הזה שאותו אנחנו מקיימים לא היה צריך להתקיים. אירוע שבו אנחנו שווים אל אירועי העבר, אל רוחות העבר, משום שאין מדובר ברוחות עבר, מדובר ברוחות הווה. וזוהי בעצם תמצית הבעיה שלמולה אנחנו מתמודדים. האנטישמיות על כל גווניה ומרכיביה, לצערי הרב, עדיין כאן איתנו, מעולם לא הורידה את ראשה המכוער. היא משנה פנים ומשנה צורה והופכת לעתים להיות מתוחכמת יותר, ובשפות שלא הורגלנו לשמוע אותה בהן, למשל הפרסית ושפות אחרות, אבל זו תופעה שעדיין מצויה כאן עמנו ואנחנו מחויבים להילחם בה. והדוח הזה שמצביע על המגמות, על ההתפתחות, על הקיום של התופעה הזאת, הוא אבן דרך חשוב במאמץ להיאבק באנטישמיות הזאת. Ladies and gentlemen, 70...
כן, אנחנו רוצים לשמוע. לא שאתם מקליטים או שלא.
Ladies and gentlemen, 80 years after the Nazi Party took over in Germany, almost 70 years after the break of the Second World War, and we still have to deal with these bad memories, bad winds, because this has to do not with the memory but with the reality of our life today. Unfortunately, antisemitism didn't disappear. It's still with us, and this is the challenge we'll have to face, we are facing, thanks to this report, this contribution of the center, of the researchers who map for us anti-Semitism today, and I would like to use this opportunity to thank Mr. Cantor for his commitment and his moral support for us and for what we are doing here in this university. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, פרופסור זיסר. תודה גם על המילים הראויות של הפתיחה בעברית. באמת, תוך כדי העבודה היה ויכוח מתמיד. אנטישמיות אלימה, אנטישמיות כלפי אנשים, אנטישמיות מילולית, מעליבה, מה חשוב יותר, מה עולה, מה יורד. זה היה, ההכנה של העניין הזה היא באמת כאב לב לא קטן. תודה לך על דברי הפתיחה ועל התמיכה. And now it is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Moshe Cantor. Dr. Cantor is president of the European Jewish Congress, an umbrella of 42 Jewish communities in Europe. And Europe, as you know, is the arena, Western Europe especially, is the arena where anti-Semitism takes place nowadays. He's also a president of an organization called, he's president of many organizations, but this one catches the eye, and this is the Luxembourg Forum for the Prevention of Nuclear Catastrophe, which is, I think, a forum apt in time. And he also has an honorary PhD from Tel Aviv University bestowed on him in 2004. Thank you. I would like to echo what Professor Eyal Zisser has said regarding your support, not for Tel Aviv University, not only for us, for many enterprises in the Jewish world. Please, you have the floor.
Dina, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Zisser. I'm very appreciative about your introduction. European Jewish Congress is an institution which is inheriting the right to represent the historical memory of Shoah. And we have to understand this. This is the only one political body at the moment in Europe which is responsible for the controlling of the level of anti-Semitism in Europe, which is responsible to address all our messages to the authorities of Europe, to the national governments of Europe, and to report to the State of Israel what is going on in Europe. According to our statistics, there is a small decline of anti-Semitic activities since 2009. However, this is a result of a dramatic spike in anti-Semitic incidents in January 2009, following Operation Cast Lead. If we were to remove this spike from 2009 report, we will see similarities in the number of types of anti-Semitic attacks as previous years, thus sadly proving that anti-Semitism has not decreased in Europe. In fact, there has been a dramatic rise in attacks on Jews by people in respected positions. What we have witnessed over the previous year in the rise of what I call respectable anti-Semitism. This is not characterized by marches of neo-Nazis through the streets or the extreme left blaming Jews for the ills of the world. This form of anti-Semitism is made by prominent and respectable officials whose words are heard by millions of TV screens, in newspapers and books, and on the internet. Examples of such respectable anti-Semitism include German Bundesbank board member Thilo Saracen, a front runner to become the next head of the European Central Bank, who said that all Jews share a certain gene. European Commissioner for Trade Karel de Gucht, who told a radio station in his native Belgium that Jews are irrational when it comes to the Israel and the Middle East conflict, that the average Jew had a belief that they are right and difficult to counter with rational arguments, and complain about power of Jewish lobby in US policy. Greek Orthodox Church leader said on Greek television that the blame for Greece's financial meltdown is on an international Zionist conspiracy and a group of Jewish bankers who planned to enslave Greece and Christian Orthodoxy. These are just 3 examples from the end of the last year. They each evoke terrible anti-Semitic accusations that many thought were left behind in New Europe. Some sounds like they were taken out of the pages of the protocols of the elders of Zion. That such prominent figures can express such anti-Semitic statements is extremely disturbing and unacceptable. Whereas many anti-Semites are seen as extremists who have little following and remain at the margins of society, these respectable anti-Semites have power and their messages resonate among millions. Europe needs to have a better definition of anti-Semitism and stronger mechanisms to impose severe penalties against those who make such anti-Semitic statements. Freedom of speech is a value in Europe, but surely the language of hatred and discrimination that can and does result in violence is unacceptable. I'm sorry, maybe you have something more interesting to discuss.
No, she's over.
Before any right of freedom is the right to life and security. All levels of society need to be accountable for their words and their actions. Jews cannot possibly feel safe on a continent whose prominent figures can say such things. If the Jews of Europe cannot receive protection or relief from mainstream officials, then we are entering a very dark period for Jewish Europe. A case in point is Malmö, Sweden. In Malmö, the Jewish community is disappearing before our eyes, fleeing a city where they are constantly a target. In October 2010, a group of thugs stormed a children's event shouting "Heil Hitler" and calling the children Jewish pigs. Unfortunately, the mayor of Malmö, Ilmar Reepalu, was re-elected in the Swedish city only weeks before. Reepalu was infamous for starting that anti-Semitism was an understandable consequence in the Israel-Palestinian conflict and claimed, "We accept neither Zionism nor anti-Semitism," equating Jewish national self-determination with hate and racism. Reepalu's comments, while unsophisticated, are generally accepted by many. The consequence is that events in the Middle East will result in more anti-Semitic incidents, as if there is a natural connection. This provides legitimacy and an excuse for anti-Semitism. Those who excuse this behavior have to ask themselves why it never happens in reverse. When there is a terrorist attack on Israel, you will never see Jews abusing Muslim schools or attacking mosques. This also leads to an atmosphere of casual acceptance of anti-Semitism, as if to say, the Jews had it coming. This is an undercurrent in today's Europe among sectors of media, intellectuals, politicians, and etc. This is what perhaps most differentiates Europe from the US. The response to a Helen Thomas-like incident in Europe would probably not have resulted in her dismissal. Public figures must be held responsible for their statements. Only through accountability will end such acceptance of anti-Semitism. 2011 should be the beginning of the fight back against not only hatred and intolerance, but the acceptance of such outrages. However, the signs are not so promising. 2010-2011 is also demonstrated by the continued rise of the far right across Europe, where the racist, intolerant, xenophobic right makes a substantial gain. Most noticeably are the Jobbik Party in Hungary, the Freedom Party in Austria, the success of the True Finns Party in the recent elections in Finland, and of course the Marine Le Pen's National Front in France, who is gaining power in the polls for the upcoming elections for the presidency in France. We also see a growth of the delegitimization campaign against Israel. This campaign is attempting to penetrate all walks of life, including academia, culture, the unions, and mainstream politicians. These groups use classical anti-Semitic acquisitions, ironically made popular by the extreme right, to further their campaign against Israel. The central themes were the Jewish Zionist world power and conspiracy, and the demonization and delegitimization of Israel, mainly by comparing it to Nazi Germany and labeling it an apartheid state. These types of labels and the constant false acquisitions have allowed groups like Free Gaza Movement and the IHA to recruit Europeans to once again join a flotilla to Gaza. The flotilla's aims are illegitimate, its actions illegal, and the participants irresponsible. We call on all European governments to prevent its citizens from participating in such a provocation. The year ahead is full of challenges for Israel and for Jewish people. The Euro plays a major role in many of them. I hope the European leadership acts wisely to ensure that once again the Jewish state and the Jewish people are not targets for the extremists. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. and well, it's up to the press representatives here to carry on this message or this call on European authorities to and worldwide as well to ensure that the Jewish communities are not held responsible for anything not done by them, including Israel. The Jewish communities, their safety, their well-being has to be kept, and the fact, as you have mentioned, the fact that Jews are subject not only to insulting comments by officials of high stature, but to abusive behavior on the streets and wherever they are, is a fact that cannot be tolerated. Thank you again. And now we switch to the second part. And the second part will, as we said, be a presentation of the findings, the analysis, and the numbers. I would like to emphasize that this is a work done by a large number of researchers sitting here. You have all the telephone numbers. You will be able later to call upon them according to your areas of interest. I'll come back to the two speakers in a minute. Ms. Irena Kanterovich, the former Soviet Union, Dr. Rafi Vago, Eastern Europe, Sarah Rembishevsky, Western Europe. Then we have Scandinavia, Michael Tosavainen. We have here Dr. Uri Scott. He's acting head of the institute. He's new to our work, and we are teaching him the job, and he's welcome to the company. Dr. Esther Webman, who is an expert on the Arab and Muslim world, and now Advocate Aryeh Zuckerman, who is a Secretary General of the European Jewish Fund. I would like now to ask Dr. Ronnie Stauber, who collected this work, the joint work of the researchers. I'd like to add that the information comes from all over the world. We compare data with ministries of interior, with polices, with Jewish communities, and do our best not to overestimate, not to underestimate, but to be as exact and balanced as possible. Not to panic, but not to underestimate as well. He collected it and wrote, then we all read, of course, and Dr. Chaim Feierberg, who will present the statistics. Please.
I need the mic.
You need a mic, sure. מה? כן, אולי אנחנו נזוז. אולי אנחנו נזוז. אתה צודק.
We move.
וואלה. מה לעשות? יגאל, תן לי, זה עם המחשב תנו מכה לראש, נתקד אליי. כשאתה עובר עליו, הבחור, זה החומר אצלכם פה.
Okay. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You all have. May I begin, please? Okay. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You all have our overview and the press release and the general analysis. So, what I would like to do is only to emphasize very briefly our main points, our main findings for 2010. And then, as Professor Porat said before, we will open the floor for your questions, and all the researchers are here, and they will be very happy to answer your questions. And my colleague here, Chaim Feierberg, he will show and explain the graphics that will illustrate our findings. Let me first emphasize that we relate here to major, and I emphasize major violent incidents, and that category, it includes physical violence, vandalism, and direct threats. But besides them, we and the other agencies, Jewish agencies, general agencies, in various communities, we collected information on hundreds of incidents of harassment, insults, defamation, and so on and so forth. Now, as every year, we would like to begin with a comparison between the previous year, the last year, 2009, and 2010. And let me say, first of all, you can see here the comparison. But let me just emphasize that 2009 was an extraordinary year compared, and you can see it here, compared to the whole decade. And the unprecedented wave of anti-Semitic incidents in 2009 was affected considerably by Operation Cast Lead. So compared to 2009, the number of incidents decreased in about 46%. And the impact of this, as Mr. Cantor mentioned, the impact of the flotilla event in 2010, there was an impact, but this impact was relatively moderate in comparison to the impact of Operation Cast Lead in 2009. Still, this is what we would like to emphasize, 2010 was the third highest number of anti-Semitic incidents since worldwide statistics had begun some 20 years ago. Now, לעבור למדינות. About 60% of all incidents, we don't have yet the full picture from the United States. We are still waiting for the data to come from the ADL. They are working with us. But the picture that we have now, we can say that about 60% of all incidents occurred in countries with relatively large Jewish communities, such as France, UK, in North America, Canada, and in these countries, relatively large Muslim communities. We got the same pictures from Jewish and security agencies in various countries, and the picture is that on the one hand, we can speak about a decline compared to 2009, but on the other hand, on a continuation of a relatively high level of anti-Semitic incidents. Not only violent. We are relating here to violent incidents, but the picture that we got from around the world, and particularly from European countries, is that in other categories as well, there is a very high level of anti-Semitic events. And the picture is even more problematic if we compare the level of anti-Semitism in the last 10 years, I mean the 90s, to the previous, this decade, to the 90s, and the previous decade. And here you can see that you can see the increase, and the increase is really dramatic increase in the number of the anti-Semitic incidents. Now, what are the main conclusions from our findings? So first of all, of course, and we said it before, the Middle East events, particularly dramatic events such as Operation Cast Lead, catalyze hate crimes against Jews. But at the same time, we would like, and this is something that we emphasized last year and years before, we would like to emphasize that regardless any specific Middle East events, the number of anti-Semitic events continue to grow. I mean, even in those years where we can't really point on a dramatic event in the Middle East, we can see that the number of incidents particularly in Europe, but in North America, they continue to grow. And in our overview, we quoted the president of the French Protection Service of the Jewish community, Eric de Rothschild, who wrote, and I think this is really summarizing the problem, that more than 10 years after the resurgence of anti-Semitism at a level that nobody expected, it is clear that it has settled permanently in our society, despite the effective action of the police and the justice to prosecute. And one of the most disturbing phenomena is that Jews, mainly religious Jews, are particularly disturbed by, we spoke mainly now about violent incidents, but I would like to emphasize that the main problem, in our opinion, is the harassment, that daily harassment of Jews in the way to children, in the way to schools or coming back from schools or in schools. Mainly religious Jews, I mean Jews that the perpetrators can identify as Jews in the way to synagogues, coming back from synagogues. And the most, maybe for me, I must say that the most disturbing phenomenon, as someone who is living in Israel, is to know that people decided not to wear kippah anymore.
Well,
in Europe, not only in France, not only all over.
In Switzerland.
In Sweden, in many countries, not only in France, decided not to wear because they can't walk in streets. And they're afraid that people will identify them as a Jew. So this is like going back, I mean, years before. The Jew cannot appear in the street like a Jew, as a Jew. Now, let me just end by relating to the reason for the hate crimes against the Jews. And the reason is a combination between the traditional anti-Semitic hatred and the new one that doesn't distinct between the state of Israel and the Jews worldwide. Thus, as addition to the old perpetrators, which were always the neo-Nazis and the extreme right, large part of the incidents, particularly, as Professor Porat mentioned, the street violence, were perpetrated by young Muslims. And what we can see is that in the anti-Israel propaganda of the radical left, we can find, and here is the combination between hatred towards Israel and the old anti-Semitism, is that in the anti-Israel propaganda, we can find anti-Semitic elements, anti-Semitic ideas, and at the same time, Jews are being attacked because of Israel, allegedly, because of Israel deeds. So the idea is the Jews must pay for the allegedly Israel crimes. So the problem is that the perpetrators, they see Jews and Israel as one evil entity. And what Mr. Cantor mentioned before, and this is very important and very disturbing, is that we found that this year, intellectuals and public figures, and you mentioned the mayor of Malmo, that they called Jews to renounce Israel on principle. So if you don't want to be attacked by perpetrators, you must or you should renounce Israel on principle, and this is a real problem. Thank you very much.
Okay, let me add a few little information. As you can see, I put the slide of the major incidents, major violent incidents, into moduses. One of them is the modus operandi, and the other one is the what is the target. And the first breakdown, you can see that violent that include by weapon and weaponless, but directed directly to person is, let's say, the second to vandalism. And I think that this is maybe the main phenomenon now in Europe and let's say in all over the world, that most of the incidents, most of the violence directed to persons, on persons and at persons. So people that walk in the streets, studying in schools, going to synagogues, are the main target today all over the world. If we have to compare it to the 90s, we can see a shift from vandalism that focused on the cemeteries, mainly on cemeteries and defamation of and desecration of cemeteries, to violence against persons and other major Jewish institutes. If I have to compare it to 2009, although there is a decline in the number of major violent incidents, you can see that the breakdown is very similar. And let's say that in 2008, in 2010, the rate of attacks on people that involved by weapon and weaponless violence was increased if we have to compare it to 2009. And if I have to compare it to the other years, we can see that there is a permanent increase in violence against people that using weapon and other means of violent acts. And if I have to compare the targets, I can tell you that the breakdown is very similar, although the number of incidents decreased. So let's say that the influence of the caste-led operation was very limited by the number of violence acts, but not of the breakdown of the systems of the attacks against people and other major Jewish institutions. And if I don't have the slides here, but if I have to get inside the countries themselves, let's say like United Kingdom, we are after the Hassan, so we can talk about them. Although there is a decrease of anti-Semitic events, overall anti-Semitic events, if I have to check only the violence against persons in the United Kingdom, there is almost no change between 2009 and 2010. So this is something that I think the European Jewish Congress and other Jewish institutions in Europe has to take care on, that violence against persons is in a permanent increase during the last decade. Thank you very much.
so much. I'd like to add one more stage. Indeed, some 10 years ago, most of the cases, about 60% were indeed desecrations of cemeteries. And then the next stage was attacks on synagogues, especially by using arson. And again, something close, the number was close to 60%. And now, as you both mentioned, and Dr. Kanter mentioned, the attacks on the person of people identified as Jews is the major venue, or the major vehicle, and this is disturbing, insulting, and is a burden on the daily life and the well-being of Jewish communities. The floor would be open now for you to ask any question, any question that you can answer. Questions, and I have...
Capable to be answered.
Exactly. And I've introduced the staff to you. They are all, each and every one, is expert in his or her field. And please start. I think you, yeah. Sarah?
יש לי שאלה.
So, Sarah Frankel, a very known radio and estimated, highly esteemed radio person.
Thank you very much. מעניין לדעת האם מישהו ניסה לבדוק מה גורם, מה המניע בכלל לאנטישמיות. מה הסיבות?
היום?
מה?
היום?
כן, מה הסיבות לאנטישמיות? מה? קנאה ביהודים? אני לא יודעת מה.
מישהו רוצה היום? אוקיי, בבקשה. טוב. שאלה א', מה הסיבות היום? בבקשה. כן, אדוני.
יצחק הילדסהיימר, מקור ראשון. אני רוצה לשאול גם את אנשי האוניברסיטה וגם את דוקטור קנטור, ואני אשאל באנגלית. First of all, we heard here that people avoid themselves from wearing a kippah in France, in Switzerland, and so on. I must emphasize personally that when I'm going to England and France and even to Ukraine, I never put off my kippah. And my question is whether... The question is whether... Don't you think that if the anti-Semite knows that as a result of their activities, Jewish people who used to wear kippah take it off, whether it has negative influence on them. Maybe it's better that nobody will take off his kippah. That's one question. Second question is, we heard last week that some graves were hit in Istanbul, and as I know, the Prime Minister of Turkey, and I spoke to the Chief Rabbi of Turkey recently, they said that in the last few months, Turkey is of course against Israel, but there is no anti-Semitism in Turkey. And this really happened after a few months of quiet period. What are you going to say about it? Excuse me, I have another question.
Let us add some more questions. רגע, אנטישמיות בטורקיה. Please. Yeah.
Two questions for Dr. Kantor from Walla News. First question, a bit about for your best knowledge, the geographic or socio-economic background of the attackers of Jews in Europe. Do you find any connection between, does it usually appear in big cities or small cities? And the second question, for your best knowledge, the strongest ideological people against Jews, ideological forces against Jews in Europe, who are the leaders main leaders of Antisema in 2010.
Okay. One last question for this first round, please, and then we will start answering.
What's the identity of the people who are perpetrating the violent attacks? In the past, many years ago, we knew it was right-wing fascists. Who's doing it today?
Okay. Perhaps we'll start with your question. חיים, דוקטור פיירבר, אתה רוצה לענות על זה? שמי עושה את זה היום? אמרנו ימין ו... לא?
אנחנו רוצים שתדברו למיקרופונים, כשנוכל לקבל...
אוקיי, אז בואו הנה, חבר'ה. אתם צודקים.
לעשות את זה, איך אמרת לו שזה פעולה טכנית אחת? לעשות עוד אחד. עכשיו אפשר לעשות.
אוקיי, שאלה ראשונה הייתה, מי בעצם מבצע היום את ההתקפות, בייחוד כלפי אנשים? אתה אמרת ימין קיצוני, you said extreme right, and also?
Okay, so if we take the Britain for example, we can see that the perpetrators are split into two equal parts. 50% are by white people that are recognized as the extreme right, and I'm using the British terms, and of course, and the other half is by persons from Asiatic origin or something like that. So we can say Muslims mostly. So and in France,
So it's 50%?
in the United Kingdom, and in France, most of the recognized or the evidence that we have is that by Muslims. And let's say in Ukraine and Russia, the situations are made by local people, and of course, other countries that don't have a vast Muslim population, you can say that most of the perpetrators are local from the right. Local from the right. The right, let's say.
תודה רבה. Would you like to answer?
Yes, with pleasure.
Please. Okay.
It was a very interesting question about what are the contemporary reasons of anti-Semitism in Europe and who are the main deliverers of these anti-Semitic events just now in Europe. First of all, we have to understand that the reason during the last 10 years, in comparison what's happened 30, 40 years ago, are quite different. First of all, we have to understand that we have very, very new anti-Semitic trends in Europe. First of all, the phenomenon which is called anti-Israelism. It's a new phenomenon which appeared recently and never was in the past. Then we have a phenomenon which is called the failure, in a very diplomatic way. The majority of leaders call it the failure of multiculturalism in Europe. But in reality, it's not multiculturalism. It's monoculturalism, the culturalism of Islamic presence in Europe. Because this is the case. There are a lot of aggressive minorities with Arabic and Islamic origins. This is the phenomena which is completely new. If we are speaking about who are the carriers, who are the deliverers of this new phenomena of anti-Semitism, we are not speaking about traditional things like street fighters, neo-Nazis, ultra-rights, and this and that. Even we have some increase in ultra-right presence in Europe. especially as we mentioned, Jobbik Party in Hungary, in Finland we have the phenomena, we have in Sweden the phenomena, but I want to stress your attention on the new phenomena and new deliverers. Who are the new deliverers? NGOs, non-government organizations. And structurally, it's the new phenomena, which never happened before. Very well paid, very well organized, with a good presence and systematic presence in media, and etc., etc. Second part of deliverers are so-called top intellectuals and officials. How we could imagine, let's say 20, 25 years ago, that Mein Kampf appears in Europe. We have it in Greece. A guy wrote a book, everything about Jews. And this book, 1,000-page book, was almost close to be distributed in all schools and libraries in Greece. And only because of very active position of local community, Greek community, together with European Jewish Congress, we visited a few times Greece, we met with authorities, we succeeded to put this case into the court, and through legislation, through legal actions, we succeeded to stop it. Maybe we continue to fight, but at the moment it's somehow managed. This example shows that we have the new phenomena of deliverers, the officials. And I want to stress your attention on one very important point. What is the difference between Europe and America? We know very well that somebody from White House, Helen Thomas, allowed herself to make some anti-Semitic speeches, and she was fired immediately. In Europe, we have different situation. 2 times after Mr. de Gucht allowed himself to express his opinion about Jews and Jewish lobbies, I received 2 letters from the President of the European Commission to excuse him. But he is still in his office. He is not fired. And this is the difference. Okay? We can of course excuse somebody with apologizes. If somebody delivers us apologizes. But we want also the results. Apologizes should be realized in some irrevocable actions. And just to finalize the answer to this very interesting question, I want to stress your attention. We see, as European Jewish Congress, the only one fundamental way how to prevent all these negative developments in Europe. Through legislation. And the subject of legislation should be the thing which is called limited tolerance. Limited by what? By the demands of the global security.
Thank you. Ma?
Huh?
About Istanbul?
About Istanbul.
And your kippahs.
And the kippah.
Okay.
כן. אתה רוצה לדבר על איסטנבול?
לא מסכים עם זה עכשיו.
מה? לא מסכים.
זה שייך ל-2011.
אוקיי.
Should I answer? Just want to add one to Dr. Cantor.
שנייה, כן. רגע, עוד רגע. התשובה ממשיכה.
I think that the example that Dr. Cantor brought about Greece, and by the way, we are in a couple of days we are going to publish a paper about this event that you mentioned. We are I think in a week we are going to publish a paper about the event that Dr. Cantor mentioned and all the legal struggle regarding this event. But I think that Greece is a very important example for to answer your question, who are the perpetrators, that we can see the old perpetrators in Europe and the new perpetrators. And the old perpetrators are members of the extreme right, neo-Nazi groups. They hate Jews. I mean, what is the answer why they hate Jews? I mean, this is a very old question, and we don't have a definite answer for that. I mean, this is historical hatred. And this is something that we can see, for example, in Greece. Last year, several times, Jewish institutes in Greece, including a synagogue and other institutes, were desecrated by members of an extreme right-wing group in Greece. So we should make a clear distinction, I mean, between different parts of the world. I mean, there are in Eastern Europe, in the former Soviet bloc countries, I mean, the main perpetrators are still members of the extreme right. The new perpetrators in Europe, as you mentioned, are young Muslims, many of them, not all of them. There are still many members of the extreme right, and Professor Feuerberg mentioned still many members of the extreme right and neo-Nazi groups in Europe. But many of the new perpetrators are young Muslims, and they are, of course, affected by the Middle East events. But the problem is that, and this I think the main problem is that anti-Semitic negative stereotypes were absorbed by young Muslims in Europe. I mean, the young generation in Europe. So you cannot, I mean, if they hopefully, once the problems in the Middle East, we'll have peace in the Middle East, we are not sure what will happen in Europe, because many of the anti-Semitic stereotypes, the negative anti-Semitic stereotype, were absorbed by young Muslims in Europe, and this is a real problem.
Perhaps Esti or Rafi, let me, כן, עוד נגלה של שאלות. Before one more round of questions, one more word regarding the combination of Sarah's question and your question of the who and the why.
About why?
About the who perpetrates and the why. Why perpetrates. You mentioned the NGOs. There is today, youth and young people organized in NGOs, not government, but non-governmental organizations, who are most of them on the left, very idealist. In principle, they are idealists. They are looking for an ideal. They are looking for something to fill the void in values in Europe, which is today, I would say, valueless. There is no direction, there is no ideology. You are looking for ideologies. And once this public is given a target, is given a symbol, a very simple, clear-cut, black-white symbol, that's Israel supported by the Jews, this is the source of evil, and they have here, this left and idealist people have a meeting point with the interests of radical Muslims. There you have, in this meeting point, you have the fire starting. You see it in the demonstrations that are perpetrated by both, by leftists and Muslims, radical Muslims, and you see the slogans, you see the attacks are following the demonstrations on Jews. So the point where they meet, this is where it starts.
do you find any connection between the economic situation of this group and
Yes.
their activity?
Let me answer.
Okay.
Let me answer.
Okay,
Okay,
economic. Would you like to take one more question? Yeah?
Dr. Kandor, if I may, you were talking about the new paradigm of anti-Semitism, but you have not touched about some of the source feeding it, which is right here in Israel, and that is the academia, the post-Zionist academia. If you take, for instance, Professor Nick Gordon at Ben Gurion University calling on the op-ed pages of the LA Times to boycott Israel. Isn't Israel at fault to an extent?
Okay. Professor Porat just now mentioned idealistical dimension in the growth of anti-Semitism. I want to mention some pragmatic reasons of growth of anti-Semitism about, and this phenomena covers completely all reasons we discussed before. This position of European Jewish Congress and my own is very close to the position of the government of the State of Israel. When we are thinking about why this campaign of delegitimization of Israel happens, why the growth of anti-Semitism in Europe happens, why new trends appears in the dimension of NGOs, in the dimension of top politicians, even with diplomatic status, we have to understand the common thing. The common thing is Iran. The government of Israel is very oftenly criticized because of their concentration on the Iran's issues. One second.
I want you to look at the camera.
Myself. There. Okay, sorry. I'm trying to look to the faces.
Yeah.
Okay. They are criticized because they are too much concentrated to Iran. This is not enough concentration. And we also understand. We have to understand what is the situation with Iran, and we immediately come to anti-Semitism. Immediately. Let me remind you shortly what is going on. For many, many thousands of years, Iran is streaming to the domination in the area. The main force which is preventing Iran to dominate in the area is the existence of the State of Israel, because of their military potential, because of their political potential, and etc., etc. That's why Iran organizing an international terroristic nets like Hamas and Hezbollah. That's why Iran organizing ideological net, financing NGOs directly and indirectly in Europe. That's why we have the permanent material support from Middle East, from Iran exactly. And because of this, we have the growth of anti-Semitism in Europe. If we see a very precise statistics about the growth of import-export operations to Iran and from Iran, we see that in spite of many, many declarations of the majority of European states, in spite of the sanctions which are increasing, improving against Iran, we see a very remarkable thing. We see a very slight growth of import operations to Iran, practically from all countries of Europe, excluded United States, of course, and Great Britain, and a dramatic growth of export operation from Iran to all countries again excluded United States and Great Britain. What it means? You know what is the growth of the export operations from Iran in 2009 and beginning in 2010? Up to 90% in comparison with the previous year. We do not have the latest statistics. It's an official statistics. That's why we have to understand who is the biggest beneficiary of the campaigns of the delegitimization of Israel and the growth of anti-Semitism in Europe. This is the point which I call pragmatic. Of course, Professor Parat is very right. The world is multidimensional. This is one dimension, but ultra-rights, ultra-lefts, other neo-Nazi components are very important.
אוקיי, עוד שאלות?
כיפה.
אוקיי. Your question struck me not only because you're a person who wears a kippah and is insisting on wearing it wherever you go, which is, of course, should be respected. I happen to be in Torino, in Italy, in a synagogue. The ceremony, everything ended, and the rabbi told the community, as a matter of fact, please pay your duties and do this, and we'll meet in a week, and please, when you go out, don't forget to take the kippah off and put it in the pocket. And he said it
in Torino.
He said it in such casual, everyday, self-understood manner that it. And it's Torino. It's in north of Italy. It's the city where Jews helped Garibaldi and Mazzini to start. And if you asked whether this taking off the kippah has a destructive effect on the Jews, this I cannot answer. This, of course, it is inside. The fact that they have to take it off, or they decided to take it off, is insulting in itself, that's no doubt, and is a testimony to the lack of a sense of security. What is relevant to what we are doing, we are trying to estimate the number of attacks. What we asked ourselves is, had all the Jews who are taking off the kippahs put on the kippahs, would violent attacks be higher? Would more people be attacked? This is the question that we asked ourselves, and we cannot, it's also hypothetical, and we cannot answer that.
But what is your feeling? Yes?
Yes.
The answer is yes.
Yes, if it could be higher, the answer is yes. And does it hurt Jews? Yes. It's yes to two of the questions.
I have a more precise answer.
Kadima.
Yeah. The answer is, if you do not want somebody to take out your trousers, better to keep kippah on the head. Yeah?
רגע, שנייה. one word in Hebrew. אתם זוכרים את סיפור על אהבה וחושך של עמוס עוז, אוקיי? את אבא שלו בא הביתה ביום הכרזת המדינה, אחרי הריקודים ברחובות, ואומר, יהיה פה קשה, ויהיו פה מלחמות, ושום אנטישמיות לא תיפטר אף פעם, אבל כמו שהורידו לנו את המכנסיים בווילנה, פה לא יורידו, וזה ההבדל העיקרי. זה קטע נהדר בעמוס עוז. בבקשה.
A regular attack, let's say, mostly in Europe, because this is the place that we have the most of the information from, is taking place like this. People approach a Jewish person that walks in the street and ask him, "Are you a Jew? What is the whatever on your head? Why? What is the Magen David here? What is the meaning? And then it going on and come to Barnett. So you can say logically that if you don't have those attributes, you are not being attacked. So this is the answer for you. And most of the information starts like this. A visible Jew was attacked. A visible Jew was stoned. A visible Jew, tak. And that's life.
Rafi, Dr. Rafi Vago, you haven't spoken
very
yet,
brief,
please.
yes, thank you. A very brief remark. It has been mentioned by the opening remarks by Professor Eyal Zisser and by Professor Porat. Let us not forget that we are here on the eve of the Holocaust Day, and the reason that we are timing our yearly reports is because of the Holocaust Day. As we have been discussing the Holocaust Memorial Day, as we have been discussing now the patterns of violence and the dynamics of violence and who is doing what, our data, not so much only the data, but our analysis, deals also with the anti-Semitic discourse, which more and more identifies Israel today and the Jews as being the Nazis of today. And I think that this is a thing that you cannot measure exactly who is hitting whom and where, which is very essential, crucial, and very important for our work. But let us not forget that the delegitimation of Israel as a Jewish state continues in a way the same genocide and the same massacre of the Jews as it was done physically 70 years ago. So I think this point about the continuity in anti-Semitism, and Mrs. Frankel has asked the question, what is anti-Semitism today and why the reasons, the same type of anti-Semitism, which is also racism, which today sees Israel as being the Nazi state, and I have counted in the last moments at least 5 or 6 times in our report, and there are much more probably, when in different countries, in different places, Israel is being identified as the Fourth Reich and the continuators of the Nazi ideology and the Nazi regime. And this is, I think, very important for us to remember, besides our factual aspects.
Okay.
Just to continue what Rafi said, and just to continue what Rafi said, and just to mention another very important sentence from Amos Oz book about his father, that his father told him that when I grew up in Europe, I used to see the sentences Jews go to Palestine. Jews go to Palestine, and now when I'm coming back to Europe, I see the words Jews go out of Palestine. So this is the combination between anti-Israel and anti-Semitism.
חיים, ואחר כך ארי, בבקשה.
I want to add something to Dr. Vago's remarks. And a little bit, I want to make a shift from the anti-Semitism to the non-tolerance and the racism in Europe. First they came for the Jews. But if we are looking deeply to the information that we got from Central Europe, from Hungary, from Romania, from the Czech Republic, not only the Jews are the target, also the Roma. And the same people, the Gypsies, the Tzoanim, the same people that attack the Jews attack the Roma. And let's say that they are the main victim in several countries today. So the phenomenon of the perpetrators of the militia in Hungary is very, it has to concern every one of us. It's something that for me reminds the SA, the first steps of the SA in the 20s and the 30s. A government that can't control a militia that take or put their goal to attack a certain minority in their countries, part of the country. And maybe we are in a very delicate moment that Europe has to say to itself where we are going from here. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Dr. Feiberg for this remark. We had a paper on the Roma and the problem today in Europe. The way they are attacked, the ways they are abused, sometimes killed, is not only severe and disturbing, it's really a stain, no less than a stain on Europe of today. And while we are concentrating today on anti-Semitism, this is our report and this is our issue, we really shouldn't forget that there are others who are in a much worse position. Please, Advocate Zuckerman, and then your question.
One answer to your question, which I see as very important, what's happening here in Israel as reflecting the delegitimization campaign in Europe. One of the focal points that I would say European Jewish Congress and European communities are trying with regard to fighting the like known as the DBS, the boycotts, the delegitimization, etc., is by trying to delegitimize the action itself. France, for instance, has a law which forbids boycotts against another democratic state. And this is something that we try to duplicate to be used in other European states, meaning fight it in courts, fight it with legal means to boycott the boycotters. But at the same time, when something that would be looked as an internal Israeli issue, boycotting an Israeli college, the famous case of Ariel College, calling for boycotts that are coming from any university in Israel against Israeli universities and researchers, you cannot imagine how much publicity these actions are getting in Europe. This is just fuel for these NGOs to be used and to show when someone is calling our actions as illegal, the Israelis themselves are doing it. So if the Israelis, and not a small minority or one professor, but let's say majority or big group of artists are calling for boycott, that means that the boycott action is legitimate. And this is, of course, something that makes the fight against the DBS very hard in Europe.
So maybe your message should be to Israel and not so much to the diaspora.
Well, I won't go as far that this is something that starts it or this is something that is pushing. I'm saying that this is something that is fueling it. Of course, the source of this whole DBS campaign doesn't start with any actions of every left-wing group in Israel.
Please.
יוסף, אני קוריאנית מאמריקה, אני כבר 9 שנים בישראל, ואני עכשיו בדרך כנס עכשיו אני יותר מבין באנטי-סמיטיזם. מאוד אני קצת עצוב באמת. אני רוצה, יש לי שאלה, מה, אמנם יש לי ארגון אירופיה, ארגון יהודים באירופיה, מה אתם עושים וגם אני רוצה לדעת מה מדינת ישראל, איך עושים, מה, reduce anti-Semitism. ואני 9 שנים בישראל, לפני אני לא יודע בישראל כמה באמת חשוב באמת, אבל באירופיה מה מדינת ישראל, או foreign affairs and diaspora ministry, or איך אתם בקשר, מה אתם עושים בחינוך, או משהו, קמפיין. בגלל זה, אמנם הם לא יודעים מה ישראל מדינה חשוב ומה אתם ככה. בגלל זה,
I'll translate the question. And the question is that the gentleman is for 9 years now in Israel. He comes from South Korea. And he would like to know, he says that there is activity by the European Jewish Congress in Europe. He'd like to know what is done by the government of Israel in coordination with your work. If I understood you correctly? Okay, thank you.
It's a very surrealistic question, a gentleman from South Korea speaking Hebrew, and the Jewish professor interpreted it in English. I think you studied your English in your school, right?
אני גדלתי באמריקה.
He grew up in America.
You grew up in America.
Okay, but who taught you Hebrew?
But your mother tongue is English. Korean, even in America. Okay. Listen, European Jewish Congress, first of all, takes care about the protection of the all interests of diaspora, of the communities existing in Europe. But the parallel task of European Jewish Congress is to coordinate and the support of the State of Israel. And this is equal tasks, the same important for us, and it's the strategic point in our agenda. We have permanent relations with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Israel and permanent relations with the Ministry of Diaspora and Public Information. With both ministers, we have direct relations on practically every day, every week, every month basis. On top of it, we have full coordination with the Office of Prime Minister. 2 days ago, I had a meeting with the Prime Minister Netanyahu, with whom we coordinated the main topics of the agenda of European Jewish Congress, which were as following. Number one, delegitimization, the prevention of the delegitimization of Israel in Europe. It's number one. We stressed on very particular things, very important things. Then, the second thing, legitimization of the tolerance in Europe. Because what Dr. Zuckerman just mentioned, the process of the legislation, the boycotts in Europe are very important, these processes. And we have to create so-called the draft of the frame law of tolerance and global security in Europe, and the important part of this law should be the full prohibition of the boycotting any democratic country. And of course, and in Europe it's very well known that Israel is the democratic country. Israel is the biggest ally of Europe. Number three is participation of the State of Israel in the programs of European Jewish Congress to prevent the nuclear catastrophe. This is an important thing, and this business is indirectly and directly connected with the weaponization, nuclear weaponization of the Iran, North Korea, and other so-called H countries, the countries which are close to have warheads, nuclear technology, or the means of delivery. And these clubs are 20 plus countries. That's why the agenda is very wide of collaboration, of regular collaboration with the State of Israel, and I think we have very effective collaboration.
Thank you so much. I think we are coming to a close. I think your... מה? אולי תשאל אותנו אחרי כן. אוקיי, אנחנו כבר... שנייה, אז אחר כך. One more point before we really close and thank everyone. At 12 o'clock, בשעה 12, we have here a small short ceremony in which a scholarship would be awarded to a doctor, Dr. Michael Tosavainen, named after Inbal Amoyal, who perished in the Carmel fire. אני רוצה להגיד את זה גם בעברית. כתוב, אבל אני מדגישה. בשעה 12 אנחנו מעניקים כאן בחדר הזה מלגה על שם ענבל המויאל, חברים, על שם ענבל המויאל שנספתה באסון הכרמל. היינו מאוד מעריכים, המשפחה תבוא כמובן, יבואו מהשב"ס, סגן שר החינוך רצה לבוא, אבל השעה לא התאימה לו. היינו מאוד מעריכים אם חלק מכם היה נשאר ומדווח על זה, משום שאנחנו חושבים שזה הדבר שבאמת צריך לעשות. ענבל המויאל סיימה MA בבר אילן כמצטיינת רקטור, כלומר היא הייתה גם בקורס הצוערים הזה, גם באוניברסיטה. אנחנו מאוד היינו רוצים לכבד את זכרה. חברים, אני רוצה להודות לאורנה כהן, ללאה אינגבר על עבודתן המסורה, לטליה, עורך דין טליה נעמת ממרכז קנטור, לרונית גרינפלד ממכון רוט, לכל החוקרים שהיו כאן, לכל אנשים שהגיעו. דבר אחרון, זה לא חומר קל, חברים, לא קל לנו לבלוע אותו כל השנה, אבל אנחנו העברנו לכם ככל יכולתנו. אנחנו רוצים לשים את זה גם בקונטקסט הכללי, הליכה של אירופה ימינה, בעיית הצוענים, גם בקונטקסט המקומי, לשאלה שלך אם אנחנו קוראים למדינת ישראל. אנחנו לא קוראים למדינת ישראל, כל אחד זכאי לדעתו, פה מדינה דמוקרטית, סופר דמוקרטית, וכל אחד זכאי לדעתו. ואני חושבת שבאמת ערב יום השואה אלה המסרים שאנחנו מנסים להעביר: דמוקרטיה, ראיית הסך הכל, פרופורציה, ויחד עם זה הבנת המתרחש וניסיון לפעול נגדו. תודה רבה.